to about looking after the needs of the poor and vulnerable people of the world, not just in Britain, but the world at large. I'm going to just throw that question back and say, what are you going to do? Because quite clearly, governments have to be funded from taxation. Right. But that taxation we have to keep down to a minimum. But there's no doubt that as a government we will help you look after the vulnerable people of the world through your own charity, through digging your hands into your own pockets, as I'm sure you already do. Certainly the government is not going to stand in its way of your way of doing that. And yes, of course, you will, there are occasions that British people already do it through many volunteer agencies, go out and help vulnerable and needy people in the world. We've already do that. That's something which I have a great British tradition, which I'd like to see preserved and expanded.
Thank you, Charles.
I would just like to respond to that, because it's one of the problems with politics. It's been turned back to you as if it's all about looking after number one. And your motivation, looking after the 21,000 people a day dying of malnutrition and preventable disease, it's your problem. It's not. It's a global problem. It's a systemic problem. It's to do with multinational corporations getting their way. It's to do with TTIP. It's to do with WTO with no accountability. It's to do with farmers that we're actually asking to send their coffee over. They can't afford enough to buy back, they can't afford enough to feed their own families, whereas they could have grown the food on their own land, which has now been given over to coffee. Just do a bit of research on our addiction to coffee and how that is despoiling the environment and the farmers' ability to actually feed themselves. So it's climate change as well is a justice issue. We've got people in low-lying coastal areas such as Bangladesh who are suffering the consequences of climate change as we speak. And it's a double injustice, because they're least responsible for the overconsumption that the West has foisted upon them, and they're least able to afford the remedial action required to contend with it. So yes, let's be conscious. But I also heard earlier about it's great to sing the praises of people's ability to fly, but the trouble is, even the fastest growing source of carbon emissions is in the transport is flying. So we can't just take for granted cheap flights, I'm afraid to say. And it isn't because we don't want what's best for people, our contemporaries, but the Greens are thinking long term beyond the electoral cycle. It's not just about looking after one or even your contemporaries, it's about future generations and making sure they've got as much as good left behind for them to enjoy as well.